Thank you for the introduction. Welcome and hello everyone. My name is Kassa Ayalew. I am the Director for Division of Clinical Compliance Evaluation, which is a division in the Office of Scientific Investigations at the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research. We will be discussing about international clinical trials and recent ICH 603 updates in relation to your role as international clinical investigators in FDA-regulated research. The presentation has two objectives. The first objective is to highlight the significance of international clinical trials in FDA-regulated research from a GCP perspective. The second objective of this presentation is to discuss the ICH 603 updates that are relevant to your role as clinical investigators. As you all know, the contribution of international clinical trials in medical product development is generally well understood and well characterized. International clinical trials provide us access to a wide range of population across the globe, which help to improve the generalizability of clinical trial result. They also help to reduce the cost of clinical trials by accelerating patient recruitment, facilitating faster development and approval of medical product on a global scale. By conducting trials in multiple countries, the time to gather clinical trial data is reduced, and that can lead to faster regulatory submission and a quicker market entry for important life-saving treatments. International clinical trials also allow the sponsors of medical products to enter multiple markets across multiple regions simultaneously. At one time, approximately 80% of approved NDAs and BLAs had contained data from global sources, underscoring the significance of international clinical trials in FDA submissions. This reflects the increasing globalization of clinical trials, with many pharmaceutical companies conducting clinical studies across multiple countries to access diverse patient population, reduce recruitment, and lower costs. As highlighted on the previous slide, clinical trials are global, and they may be conducted under a variety of scenarios. For instance, some trials may be taking place entirely outside the United States. Also, the FDA does not require the inclusion of US participants in international clinical trials. The inclusion of US participants will be crucial for FDA evaluation, especially if the trial results are intended to support regulatory approval in the US. Let's look into the conduct of clinical trials outside the US. For trials conducted outside the United States, an IND may not be required. However, if a trial is conducted outside the US under an IND, IND requirements must be made unless they are waived. Form FDA 1572. If a clinical trial is conducted under an IND, completing Form FDA 1572, which is known as the Statement of the Investigator, is mandatory. The form shown on the right of the screen serves as a formal confirmation from the investigator that they have reviewed and understood the study protocol, agreed to follow it, and will comply with all applicable FDA regulations. It also helps to ensure that the investigators adhere to FDA requirements. Form FDA 1572 is not required for non-IND studies. Form FDA 1572 signature waiver. The FDA 1572 signature is mandatory for IND studies. Investigators conducting FDA-regulated trials outside the US may request a waiver from this requirement if local regulations forbid them from signing the Form FDA 1572. To be granted this waiver, investigators must agree to alternative commitments, including adherence to ICH 6 good clinical practice, ensuring informed consent is obtained from trial participants, and receiving approval from an independent review board or independent ethics committee. If the waiver is granted, foreign investigators can proceed with their IND studies without having to sign the highlighted section of the Form FDA 1572 as shown in yellow on the right side of the screen. Let's look into FDA's expectation of clinical investigators during GCP inspections. FDA inspections are focused on ensuring compliance with GCP and regulatory requirements. Regardless of the trial's location, clinical investigators are expected to comply with federal regulations. They are expected to demonstrate a thorough understanding of the trial, as well as to be knowledgeable about their regulatory responsibilities. Let's look into the inspection areas of focus. As stated earlier, the FDA conducts risk-based inspection of international clinical investigators to ensure adherence to GCP and FDA regulatory requirements. The inspections are designed to ensure that clinical trials are conducted with the highest ethical standards, the participant safety is protected, and that the data collected is reliable and accurate for regulatory review. The focus of clinical trial inspections include ensuring strict adherence to the approved protocol, verifying the informed consent process and IRB oversight, and comparing line listing with source records to confirm data accuracy and quality. Inspections also review the participant enrollment process, monitoring activities, and reporting to sponsor to ensure transparency and safety. Compliance with regulations such as safety reporting, financial disclosures, and protocol updates is assessed along with the proper control of investigational product and retention of records. These areas collectively ensure that trials are ethically conducted, participant safety is prioritized, and data integrity is maintained. To provide you an overview of the scope of clinical investigator inspection in a single year, we have the pie chart displayed to the right of the screen. In 2023 alone, CITC conducted a total of 445 GCP-related clinical investigator inspections related to marketing applications submitted to the FDA. About 70% of those inspections were carried out in the US, while the remaining 30% took place internationally. Most inspections for drugs and biologics for applications submitted to CITC occurred in the US and Europe. The FDA may choose to mainly conduct its inspections within the US if there are sufficient US data, there are no conflicting results between the US and the foreign data, and if there are no reports of serious scientific misconduct from foreign sites. What are the common inspectional observations? Common inspectional observations made by the FDA during international clinical investigator inspections include findings related to protocol adherence, source documentation, drug accountability, the informed consent process and procedures, and adverse drug reaction reporting, as well as issues related to IRB communication. Let's discuss now about the FDA's acceptance of foreign data and updates to ICH E6R3, as both are vital for international clinical investigators involved in FDA-regulated research. As stated before, the FDA accepts data from foreign study as long as those studies are well designed, they are conducted by qualified investigators, and comply with GCP standards. Additionally, in order to accept the foreign data, the FDA must be able to validate the data through inspections if necessary. Compliance with ICH E6 is essential in the FDA decision-making process regarding the acceptance of the foreign data from non-IND studies. Therefore, it is important to review the ICH E6 updates that are relevant to international clinical investigators. We already discussed that ICH E6 provides GCP standards to ensure that international clinical trials are ethically conducted, they are scientifically sound, and they produce reliable data. The guideline, first approved in 1996, has evolved through revisions with E6R3 currently available as a draft. The updates to ICH E6 guideline are expected to further strengthen the FDA's ability to rely on foreign data by facilitating global development of medical products. The purpose of ICH E6 updates is to modernize and update the Good Clinical Practice guideline, providing guidance for various clinical trial designs and promoting innovation. The updates aim to emphasize a risk-based, proportionate approach to trial design and conduct, while also addressing the complexity of clinical trials in the current global regulatory landscape. The development strategy for ICH E6R3 consists of overarching principles, and 2 annexes. Annex 1 consists of consideration for interventional clinical trials. Annex 2 provides additional GCP considerations for trials that use wider range of design elements and data sources, such as decentralized elements, pragmatic elements, and real-world data. When complete, ICHE 6R3 will be composed of overarching principle and 2 annexes. What are the key updates in ICHE 6R3 relevant to clinical investigators? The key updates in ICHE 6R3 include a recommendation about the use of varied approach to informed consent, i.e. the guidance recommends the use of a varied approach of informed consent, such as digital or paper or hybrid. It also has clarification about training requirement for study staff, emphasizing training should correspond to what is needed at the site for a specific study or for a specific person. The guidance also clarifies expectation regarding the use of computerized systems provided by the sponsor versus those available at the clinical practice site. It also further clarifies the expectation for sponsor investigators regarding the use of service providers during the conduct of clinical trials. ICHE 6R3 update clarifies expectations regarding identification and maintenance of source records and timely data review both by clinical investigators and sponsors. The key updates also contain clarification about requirement for delegation documentation. For example, where the clinical trial activities are performed in accordance with routine clinical care, delegation may not be needed. What's next for ICHE 6R3? The next one draft of the updated ICHE 6 guideline has been published in May 2023, and Annex 2 is currently under development. The final E6R3 guideline will replace the current E6R2, which has been in effect since November 2016. A training program for ICHE 6R3 is being developed to provide the clarification and supplementary explanation. A couple of challenge questions to test our knowledge on international clinical trials and regulatory expectations. I'm going to read the questions for you, and once I have finished reading, you may identify the best answer from the options provided. Challenge question number 1. Which of the following statement is true regarding clinical investigations conducted outside the United States? A. Investigator must always submit an IND to the FDA. B. All clinical trials must adhere to FDA regulations regardless of location. C. IND submissions are only required for phase 3 trials. D. Investigators are not required to conduct their investigations under an IND. The correct answer for challenge question number 1 is D. Investigators are not required to conduct their investigations outside the United States under an IND. Moving to the second challenge question, which is about validation of clinical trial data submitted in marketing application. Challenge question number 2. Why is it important for the FDA to validate the data from clinical trials submitted in marketing applications? A. To determine whether the clinical trial participants were compensated appropriately. B. To determine the commercial value of the product and ensure it will be profitable. C. To guarantee that the clinical trial investigators receive appropriate compensation for their work. And D. None of the above. The correct answer for challenge question number 2 is D. The other 3 choices were incorrect. The FDA validated the data from clinical trials submitted in marketing applications to ensure that the data are reliable for evaluating the safety and efficacy of the product. To wrap up this talk, I would like to share with you a couple of take-home points. As discussed during the presentation, international clinical trials are vital for generating data to support drug approvals. As clinical investigator, it is important to fully understand FDA regulatory requirements and ICH E6 good clinical practice standards to ensure successful trial conduct and data acceptance by the FDA. Here are some helpful resources that may help you further explore about international clinical trials and ICH E6 updates. Thank you all for your time and attention today. It has been a pleasure to share the information about international clinical trials and ICH E6 updates with you. Should you need to get in touch or have follow-up questions, you may contact me using my email address provided here.